Good morning, everyone. It's Friday. What do we know about Fridays? What we know about Fridays is that this Friday is the most important day of next week. There you go. You've heard it all before. It's kind of it just repeats. Well, it does though, doesn't it? You know, because this Friday happens every week, and uh, and it's just as important every Friday to get your stuff together ready for next week because it will impact on how your weekend is. Anyway, enough of that. Friday the 13th of August, it's nearly 9 o'clock, so nobody's going to listen to this live because you'll have all started work probably at this hour. I walked the dog, made coffee, had honey on toast, all very good. Um, it just came to me. This was a perfect example. This was yesterday afternoon. Uh, you know, I was, I have been, I have been struggling with a section of my dissertation. Not that I didn't understand the content that I needed to write. I just couldn't get how to write it. I could making a start's the hardest part. Is my one of my favourite watchwords or things that I consider because it is knowing where to start. And lots of students tell me this when I'm talking about assignments. They'll say I just need to kind of get the first paragraph done, and once I get the first paragraph done, and that's exactly what I'm like. So I was struggling with this methodology section, ontology and epistemology and inductive and deductive and all them kind of things, which are all highly understandable when you read it, and then you think, well, right, why do you want me to write? What do you want me to write? You know, do you just want me to describe these things? Whatever. Um, so the other thing that I think is important is, other than making a start's the hardest part, which is worth acknowledging, because sometimes we beat ourselves up for not being able to make a start. Um, let's remember that that is the difficult bit with anything, because as soon as you hit one of those kind of boundary moments where you think, right, let's get this started, you have choices, don't you? You can either start the thing or you can procrastinate. Um, and we often choose to procrastinate. Put the kettle on. I'll make a cup of tea. Be better if I've got a cup of tea. That'll help me get started. Well, it doesn't, does it? It's just put off starting. Um, so making a start's the hardest part, first thing. But the other thing is when you don't know what to do. Came across this a while back. When you don't know what to do about something, just do the bit that you know what to do something with. Didn't phrase that very well, did I? So I didn't know where to get started. Yesterday afternoon, I should have been trying to at least get 500, 700 words of this 2,000 word section done. And I just couldn't get started. So I thought, well, what can I do? And I thought, well, what I can do is go and read what other people write about this subject. So I went off and did that, spent the afternoon reading, making notes, highlighting stuff in my package on the computer, highlighting stuff, cutting and pasting stuff into the document that I'm writing in, clearly indicating when it was a direct quote and when it was a paraphrase, obviously. So I did that. I was copying and pasting stuff in, and I was still looking at it by about 4 o'clock. I was still looking at it, going, I still have no idea what to do with this jumble of thoughts. So I thought at that point, I'll go and put the kettle on. I thought I'll stop for the day. There's no point in kind of troubling myself with this any longer. I'm not getting anywhere with it. I'll go and put the kettle on and not think about it, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. And I went into the kitchen, put the kettle on, just had a bit of a, had a bit of a look about what was going on in the kitchen, had any post arrived, like do, all those kind of things. And I was stood uh, at the kettle with the tea bag. And suddenly it was just like, that's it. Ping. In my head came, that's what you need to say. That's how you need to start this thing. That's the point that you need to make right at the start. And that will lead you into all those big long words, epistemology, ontology, all that kind of thing. Now, what was going on there? And what was going on there was by taking my attention away from the thing that was causing me stress and causing me trouble, by taking my attention away, by moving to a much more inward based cognition by just kind of standing in an environment and doing a fairly routine task. It allowed my, and it works for everybody, allowed my default mode network to take over. And the default mode network is part of your brain that gets to action when you take your attention away from external things. So my default mode network activated, and your default mode network's trying to kind of make sense of all the things you've seen and heard and experienced and all that kind of thing. So my default mode network took over, and ping the idea came into my head. There are authors who leave. They don't write all day and finish a chapter and think, right, okay, I'm going to stop there and go off and have my evening or my weekend. They leave. They stop in the middle. Sometimes Ernest Hemingway famous for this? Somebody was. They stop in the middle of something to allow their default mode network to work on all the things they've written and figure out where to go next. So that was my default mode network in operation. And I came back in here, even though in my head I was finished for the day, I came back in here, I wrote the paragraph that I needed to open this section, and then looked at all of the quotes and little bits of paraphrasing that I'd typed up into my document, shuffled them all about so they made logical sense, grouped the things together, put them in a sensible order, and now today I can get on with that. And that was my default mode network in operation. And one of the things that this is honestly, because I've finished the No Office Required Bruce Daisley podcast, so this is probably the final time I'll mention it. But really, check out Bruce Daisley's book, The Joy of Work. Check out his podcasts. They're really good. The one I've been listening to at the minute is on Audible, so you have to be an Audible subscriber. But there are other Bruce Daisley. There's other Bruce Daisley stuff out there, and he's been talking about this No Office Required podcast. Has been about this return to the office or working at home, or and he's ended with some top tips, and one of the top tips that the people who've been on this podcast talking to him was exactly that, was this activating your default mode network. And the way that the person put this over was, they said, when you take breaks, regularly take breaks, and I've talked about this before, having the micro breaks, 5-minute breaks here, there and everywhere, kind of mini breaks at lunchtime, and then your macro breaks when you've got more time, bigger, longer breaks. Take breaks, this person said, which allow you to totally compress. Do something separate. Do something different. So don't go and do the same thing. Get away from the area you're working in. Go and do something completely different. And she gave a great example, which I think is wonderful, and I'm going to try next week. She said that what she does is she cooks. So when she's having her lunch break, she'll go into the kitchen and she'll cook. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd. And then because spending time cooking in the middle of the day, I usually try and have something prepared so I can have something quick. And then I thought, well, really, what you could do is you could take a little bit longer for lunch and cook your evening meal. I mean, if we're having like curry or a bolognese or something like that, well, that matures with age, doesn't it? Gets better the longer it sits in the pan. So you could cook it, leave it, and then that's something you've already bought yourself some time later on. So it's win-win. So take breaks which allow you to totally decompress. Do something separate. Her example was she cooks something on her lunchtime and then it's ready for the evening. But you can find your own. And I mentioned this one yesterday, I think I mentioned this one yesterday or maybe the day before. Resilience is not about how you endure. It's about how you recover. So we have this idea of resilience, that it's about kind of pushing yourself. Keep doing it at that level and endure the torment and the pain, and you will become more resilient. No, resilience, building your resilience, is about the recovery phase. You need to recover to ensure you've got the energy, so that when you need that energy, resilience, whatever you want to call it, you've got it. So recovery is mega important. So find out, that they say in the podcast, what replenishes, can't even say it, what replenishes you, and do that. Make sure you find time to do that. The next thing that it said was, environment feeds the soul. And I think that's just brilliant, because it does. Where you sit to do what you do has a significant impact on how you do it. So my desk is, for me, a bit messy at the minute. I've got books out and stuff, but they're out because I'm going to work on them again today. But usually I keep a clear desk policy. I clear my desk down every day, then get out on the morning the stuff that I need. But it's a bit beyond that, because what they were saying is natural daylight is really important. Nature is really important to me. I've come across a new word, biophilia. And this is I looked it up online, an innate and genetically determined affinity that human beings have with the natural world. So the more kind of natural stuff you can get in, your plants, the natural light, the better. Now that might be difficult for you, I suppose, depending on the environment you're working in. But actually, there's a bit of research I read ages ago, now 6 months, maybe even a year ago, that said even just looking at pictures of the outdoors has a calming influence on us. So there's always things you can do. There's always things you can do to bring some nature into your world, and apparently this is really good for us. So that's really good. Have a good chair was the other one. I think that's crucial. They were saying that during lockdown, people working at home, hip problems and back problems have increased, which is understandable, because lots of us are probably sat on dining room chairs and stuff. So get a good chair. You're investing in yourself, aren't you? This is one thing. I don't know. I could be talking out of turn here. This is one thing that frustrates me when people complain about not having the gear at home. And I know this is not easy for everybody, because not everybody's got the money to do this, but you could spend 6 months waiting for work to buy you a chair, or you could go and buy one yourself. You could spend 6 months waiting for work to buy you a second monitor, or you could buy one yourself. These things these days aren't that expensive. I mean, if you've got specialist needs, then you need to go through the right process. But I bought this chair at IKEA. I think it was 50 quid or something. Now I know 50 quid's 50 quid, but makes my life so much better. And my job is to make my life as easy as possible. You know, uh, I sorted out another screen because my job is to make my life as easy as possible. I know there are people out there who've worked during lockdown on a single laptop screen. How that's been even possible is beyond me. Um, so just moving through these things that Bruce and his guests were saying was enhance and increase your bubble. So using a bit of the terminology from the last year there, but enhance your bubble, enhance the amount of people and increase the amount of people you connect with, and make sure you connect with them. Because one of the things we've lost and may lose a bit of in this move to blended work, I'll come on to that, it is all those connections. But make those connections. I was talking last night, recording a podcast with Kaylee Evans, who also does this kind of thing and talks about social work a lot. And we were both saying about the connections that we've managed to make during this lockdown, connections we would not have made otherwise. And that brings me on to this other thing and I'll finish with this. This is the thing that they talked about at the end, and one of the people that Bruce Daisley was interviewing said, we're moving towards blended living, not just blended working. We're moving towards blended living. And I thought, and initially I thought, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. But for me, blended living would be a combination of home life, um, the friendships I have locally, work, but also the friendships and connections that I have in this world, in the online world, because I connect regularly now with two of my friends who I haven't connected regularly with, even though this technology has existed. I connect with them regularly now, and that's really good. Those relationships have been re-established. Um, they weren't never not established, but they weren't routine parts of life. So I've got that now. I've connected with people across the country and across the world. So this blended living I suppose, means that this concept of the blended living means that it's not just my local world that it's important now to me. It's this broader, these connections that I can foster through things like Zoom and Facebook like this and all this kind of stuff. Um, so this idea that we're moving towards blended living, not just blended working or whatever, I think is really important. And how we kind of then do that is something that we're going to have to think about, because I think this whole lockdown thing has opened a can of worms, hasn't it? Because we can do things like this now and talk to people we couldn't have routinely talked about. I would have got in my car and drove to see these friends that I now connect with um, online on a regular basis, and maybe saw them once every year, once every couple of years. Whereas now I see them once a month, or even more than that sometimes. So so this move, and how do we accommodate all of these things without just giving ourselves more things to do? So that's the secret. Blended living, um, and you know that I don't like this idea of work-life balance, but more like a work-life blend. And Kaylee was mentioning that last night when we were talking after we'd recorded the podcast. So this move to things being blended rather than balanced, because in reality we need uh, balanced lives, if you like, not balancing one thing in life against the other. So there you go. So one of the ways you can balance life is to remember that this Friday is the most important day of next week. Because if you nail Friday, if you get this Friday right and have all your ducks in a row ready for next week and have everything organised and sorted, guarantee you'll have a better weekend. It's just the way it is, and it's just the way that the research says it is. So it's not just me saying it. It's what researchers around planning and being organised have discovered, that the more we plan and organise, the more we attempt, I suppose, to predict and clarify and organise and control next week as far as you can. You can only control so much. The more able you are to then leave behind the things you need to do next week and have your weekends. So there you go. Have great weekends, and we'll see you next week. Might check in over the weekend. You never know. Might check in over the weekend. See what happens. And yeah, get Friday right, and next week will be at least a little bit better. Take care and see you soon.